So, as I've been uploading these videos to YouTube, I've discovered that I start every video with, "Hi everybody!" which is probably kind of annoying. So, we're going to start this one with, "Good afternoon! How are you guys today?" I am up to, let me get my calendar, Friday, June 14th. So, in real time, when you're watching this on Friday, June 14th, I am going to be in Kearney, Nebraska on the very last day of Rocky Mountain Race Week. So, fingers crossed I win something, and if not, I will have had a whole lot of fun anyway. So, we are going to read more of The Witch of Blackbird Pond. Today is Junior Fiction Day. And when we left off, Kit was on the roof with Nat, on Hannah Tupper's roof with Nat, and they were having a chat. Let me see where, here we go. "Are you saying I've turned into a crow?" "Not exactly." His eyes were intensely blue with merriment. "I can still see the green feathers if I look hard enough, but they've done their best to make you into a sparrow, haven't they?" "It's these Puritans," Kit sighed. "I'll never understand them. Why do they want life to be so solemn? I believe they actually enjoy it more that way." Nat stretched flat on his back on the thatch. "If you ask me, it's all that schooling. It takes the fun out of life being cooped up like that day after day. And the Latin they cram down your throat. Do you realize, Kit, there are 25 different kinds of nouns alone in the accidents? I couldn't stomach it. Mind you," he went on, "it's not that I don't favor an education. A boy has to learn his numbers, but the only proper use for them is to find your latitude with a cross staff. Books, now that's different. There's nothing like a book to keep you company on a long voyage." "What sort of books?" Kit asked in some surprise. "Almost any sort. We pick them up in odd places. I like the old log books best, and accounts of voyages. But once a man left us some plays from England that were good reading. There was one about a shipwreck on an island in the Indies." Kit bounced up off the grass in excitement. "You mean The Tempest?" "I can't remember. Have you read that one?" "It was our favorite." Kit hugged her knees in delight. "Grandfather was sure Shakespeare must have visited Barbados. I suspect he liked to think of himself as Prospero." "And you were the daughter, I suppose. What was her name?" "Miranda, but I wasn't much like her." Nat laughed. "That Shakespeare should have gone on with the story. He didn't tell what happened when that young prince took her back with him to England. I bet she gave the ladies plenty to talk about." "It wasn't England, it was Naples. And that's another thing," Nat, she remembered. "All this talk against England and the king. I don't understand it." "No, I suppose you couldn't, not being brought up here. Why are they so disloyal to King James?" "There are two sides to loyalty, Kit," said Nat, looking suddenly almost as serious as John Holbrook or William. "If the king respects our rights and keeps his word to us, then he will retain our loyalty. But if he revokes the laws he has made and tacks and comes about till the ship is on her beam ends, then finally we will be forced to cut the hawser." "But that is treason." "What is treason, Kit? A man is loyal to the place he loves. For me, the Dolphin there is my country. My father would give his life for the right to sail her when and where he pleases, and so would I. Anyway, 'twould do little good with a gale blowing to wait for orders from His Majesty in England. I suppose it's like that for these people in Wethersfield. How can a king on a throne in England know what is best for them? A man's first loyalty is to the soil he stands on." That would please Uncle Matthew anyway," Kit thought, bewildered and a little dismayed to glimpse under Nat's nonchalant surface a flash of the same passion that made life in the Wood household so uncomfortable. Nat was a New Englander too. Had she forgotten? She was almost relieved to hear Hannah's voice at the foot of the ladder. "Has thee finished the thatching yet? 'Tis high time thee had a bite of supper." Supper? Kit had not even noticed the slanting sun. "Is it as late as that?" Nat's hand on her wrist detained her as she scrambled toward the ladder. "You will come often to see her, won't you?" he reminded her. "Of course." Kit hesitated. "I worry about her sometimes," she whispered. "She seems so smart and spry, and then the next moment she seems to forget. She talks as though her husband were still alive." "Oh, that." Nat dismissed her fears with a single word. "Hannah's in good trim right enough, but her mind wanders now and then. Don't let it bother you. I have an idea Hannah is a lot older than we think, and she's lived through a lot. She and her husband starved in jail for months in Massachusetts. Finally, they were branded and tied to a cart's tail and flogged across the boundary. From what I hear, Thomas Tupper was sort of a hero. If he still seems close enough to Hannah so she can talk to him after all these years, you wouldn't take that away from her, would you?" As usual, Hannah did not urge her to stay. "My company always has to hurry off," she chuckled. "Nat always is in a hurry, and thee, and now Prudence." Who was Prudence? Pulling on his blue cotton shirt, Nat fell into step beside her along the path to the south meadow. "Remember the little girl with the doll?" Hurrying along the path, Kit told him about the reading lessons. She expected that when they reached South Road, Nat would turn back, but to her consternation, he strode along beside her, and even when she hesitated at Broad Street, he strode along beside. He did not take the hint. The happy mood of the afternoon was rapidly dissolving in apprehension. Why on earth had not Nat persisted in coming too? There would be enough explanations without a strange seaman to account for, but Nat easily matched her nervous pace with his swinging stride, apparently quite unaware of her desire to be rid of him. There they all were, sitting outside near the doorstep. Then supper must be over. As they drew near, William rose heavily to his feet and stood waiting. "Kit, where in the world have you been?" Judith spoke up. "William has been waiting for ever so long." Kit looked from one to the other, from her aunt's barely restrained tears to her uncle's waiting judgment. "There's nothing I can possibly tell them," she thought, "except the truth." "I have been helping to thatch Hannah Tupper's roof," she said. "I'm sorry that I didn't realize how late it was. Aunt Rachel, this is Nathaniel Eaton, Captain Eaton's son from the Dolphin. He was mending Hannah's roof, and I helped him." The family allowed Nat scanty nods of acknowledgment, but William did not alter a muscle of his tight-clenched jaw. The two young men measured each other for a long moment. Nat turned to Matthew Wood. "I was at fault, sir," he said with a dignity Kit would never have given him credit for. "I shouldn't have accepted her help, but 'tis a tricky job, and when she came along I was greatly obliged to her. I trust that none of you have been inconvenienced." He looked back at William, one eyebrow tilted at the old familiar angle. Kit stood helpless as he took his leave and strode lightly away. He had done his best, but the reckoning was still to come. "Why should you take it upon yourself to mend a roof for the Quaker woman?" demanded her uncle. "She lives all alone," began Kit. "She is a heretic, and she refuses to attend meeting. She has no claim on your charity." "But someone ought to help her, Uncle Matthew." "If she wants help, let her repent her sin. You are to never go near that place again, Catherine. I forbid it." Morosely, Kit followed the family into the house. "Don't mind too much, Kit," Mercy whispered. "Hannah will be all right if she has that seaman to help her. I liked his looks." Chapter 13. "To think you've never been to a husking bee!" exclaimed Judith. "Why, they're more fun than all the holidays put together. Just husking corn all the evening." It sounded to Kit like an odd sort of party. Her arms still ached from wresting the heavy ears from the stalks, row after row, hour after hour. "Oh, it doesn't seem like work when everyone does it together. We all sing, and Jeb Whitney brings his fiddle, and there's cakes and apples and cider. Oh, I always think autumn is the very best time of the year." "They say the crop is not too plentiful this year," Mercy put in slyly. "Could be there won't be as many red ears as usual." Judith tossed her head. "I'll find one, never you fear," she said blithely. "I have my own methods." "Red ears? Are they better than the others?" At Kit's innocent question, her two cousins burst into peals of merriment. "You wait and see," advised Judith. "Come to think of it, I guess I'll make certain that William gets one too. Then you'll find out." At her own sudden suspicion, Kit blushed crimson. In a rare mood of intimacy, Judith linked arms with Kit as they set out along High Street to gather the last of the corn in the meadow. It was more than the sparkling September air that accounted for her high spirits. "I just feel it in my bones," she confided, "that something wonderful is going to happen tonight at the corn husking." Judith's excitement was contagious. Kit began to feel a tingle of anticipation, though she still couldn't see how anyone could make festivity out of hard, dusty work. It was the first party of any sort which she had been invited to in Wethersfield. The few young people she had come to know, the ones she had seen at Sabbath meeting and lecture day, would all be there. "I never knew you could predict the future," she laughed, "but I hope you're right." "I know I am," said Judith, "because this time I'm going to see to it that something happens. I've made up my mind." "You mean John Holbrook?" "Of course I mean John. You know how he is, Kit, so serious and shy. He'll never be able to find his tongue if I don't help him out." "But John is still a student." "I know. He hasn't any property like William or any way to support me yet. That's why he doesn't speak. But I know how John feels, and I know how I feel, and why should we wait forever without even making plans? And what could ever be a better time than a husking bee?" Judith, Kit ventured doubtfully, do you really think... You'd better be thinking about your own affairs, laughed Judith. William isn't like John. He's like me. When he's made up his mind, he isn't going to wait forever. Why did Judith have to remind her, Kit thought wryly. Ever since the day of William's house raising, when the neighbors had gathered together and working from dawn to sunset had raised a fine imposing frame and nailed the sturdy new clapboards in place, Kit had known that William was only waiting a propitious time to speak. Since she had long since decided what her answer would be. As William's wife, she could come and go as she pleased. There would be no endless drudgery, and she could snap her fingers at a woman like Goodwife Cruff. Besides, William admired her. In spite of the fact that he was often bewildered and scandalized, he was still as infatuated as he had been that first Sabbath morning. Then why did Judith's teasing always raise this cold little lump of foreboding? She glanced longingly at the little house by Blackbird Pond and promised herself that she would steal a few moments on the way home. But work as fast as she could, when she and Judith finished their task, there was time only for a flying visit. Prudence had been there, Hannah told her, but had not dared wait for a lesson. If only these old eyes of mine could make out the letters, Hannah regretted. But actually, the child doesn't seem to need much help. She's just hungry for more to read. Poor little mite. I keep hoping the goat's milk will put a little fat on her bones. Judith was out of sight when Kit started back along South Road, but to her surprise she glimpsed a familiar white black hat in the distance and paused to wait as John Holbrook came loping along the road to catch up with her. Dr. Buckley sent me to find some skunk cabbage, he explained, waving a bunch of green. 'Tis a rare cure for asthma, he says. How do you come to be walking alone? Judith went on ahead, she explained. Had he hoped to meet Judith on the road? I stopped to see Hannah Tupper. She said the name deliberately and was rewarded by his startled eyes. The widow Tupper? Does your family know about that, Kit? Judith and Mercy know. Hannah is a good friend of mine. She is a Quaker. Does that matter? Yes, I think it does, he said thoughtfully. Not that I hold anything against the Quakers, but this woman has no proper reputation. She's been accused twice of practicing witchcraft. That's just cruel gossip. Probably, but I'd hate to see it turned against you, too. You know, Kit, there are a few people here in town that still haven't forgotten that day you jumped into the river. If they find out that you're acquainted with a witch... John, how can you pay attention to anything so silly? Witchcraft isn't silly, Kit. Dr. Buckley says... Oh, Dr. Buckley says, retorted Kit. I'm tired of hearing what Dr. Buckley says. Don't you ever think for yourself any more, John? At the hurt in his blue eyes, she was instantly contrite. I'm sorry, she said, impulsively laying a hand on his sleeve. I didn't mean that, really. But since you've been studying with that man, you seem to have changed somehow. At once he forgave her. You don't know him as I do, he explained. Every day I realize more how much I have to learn. It's not just the studies. We do change, Kit, in spite of ourselves. At least some of us do, he added with a flash of the humor she had missed in him lately. I don't want to preach at you, Kit. It's just that the Quakers have a name for stirring up trouble, and it seems to me you managed to get into enough by yourself. I know, Kit agreed cheerfully, but it's Hannah who's helping me to change. If only you knew her. John walked beside her, listening earnestly as she tried to make him understand the lonely woman in the meadow. Presently they reached the crossing at Broad Street, where John would turn toward Dividend, and they stood for a moment, both unwilling to end this rare moment of comradeship. John took off his hat, leaned his elbows on the fence post, and stood gazing reflectively back at the meadow, the wind stirring his fair hair. All at once he turned and smiled at Kit with the same unexpected sweetness that had warmed her heart that first day in Saybrook Harbor. 5 months, he said, since we came here together on the Dolphin. Such high hopes we had, you and I. It was turned out well for you, hasn't it, Kit? A fine big house going up, and a good dependable fellow like William. I hope you will be very happy. Kit colored and looked down at the browning grass. She did not want to talk about William. And you, John? She asked instead. Perhaps, he answered, and the smile lingered at the corners of his mouth. We shall see. Sooner than you think, maybe, thought Kit. Are you going to the husking bee tonight? She inquired mischievously. I don't know, he considered. Will Mercy be there? Mercy? Why, no, I don't suppose she can be. It's more than a mile away. Then I think I shall spend the evening at your house instead. I seldom have a chance to talk with her. But they say a husking bee is such... Slowly she began to realize what he had said. John, why should you want to talk to Mercy? His eyes twinkled. Why do you think I come so often? But I thought, we all thought, I mean, it has always been Mercy from the very beginning. Didn't you guess that? "Oh, John!" In a burst of incredulous joy, Kit flung both arms rapturously about his neck. With a startled glance up the road, John tactfully freed himself. His very ears were pink, but his eyes were shining down at her. "I'm glad you approve," he said. "Do you think I have a chance, Kit?" "A chance? Just you try. Oh, John, I'm so happy I could dance a jig." "I can't try yet," he reminded her soberly. "I have nothing to offer her, nothing at all." "You'll have a church of your own some day. Only, could Mercy? Do you think she could manage a minister's household? There are so many things Mercy can't do, John." Then I will do them for her," he said quietly. "I don't want a wife to wait on me. For Mercy just to be what she is, I could never do enough to make up for it." "Then tell her tonight, John," she urged, remembering the longing in Mercy's eyes. "Perhaps," he answered again. "We'll see." Walking home past Meeting House Square, Kit could hardly keep from dancing. She wanted to shout and sing, "Mercy and John Holbrook!" How right! How exactly unbelievably right! How could she keep from telling someone? They must see that she was bursting with excitement. Judith would surely... Judith. Her jubilant feet came suddenly to a halt. How could she have forgotten? Ought she to have said something to John, warned him somehow? No, she could hardly have done that in fairness to Judith. He was so completely unaware, so serious and shy, as Judith herself had said, so wrapped in his books and his dreams of Mercy, that he had never even noticed that Judith had set her cap for him. What was this something that Judith was so sure was going to happen tonight? What sort of scheme did Judith have up her sleeve? Well, if he doesn't go to the husking bee, nothing can happen, she thought practically. And who knows, if he's there with Mercy... Oh dear, Judith is going to mind terribly. But she is so proud, she'll put her nose in the air and pretend she never had such an idea in her head. And she'll get over it, I know, because John isn't really suitable for Judith. If only he will speak tonight. Judith lingered exasperatingly in front of the little mirror that evening. She was wearing the new blue wool dress for the first time, with a snowy white collar and deep cuffs, and she had never looked lovelier. Her eyes were a deep blue in the candlelight, the clear white of her skin flushed with a secret excitement. Kit fidgeted impatiently. It didn't matter how she looked. William was waiting already, and they must all get away quickly before John arrived. If only Aunt Rachel and Uncle Matthew could find something to do, and Mercy could be sitting alone in the firelight. They were too late, however. John Holbrook stepped inside the door just as the two girls rustled down the stairs, and his eyes were lively with admiration as he waited, with a courtly bow, to let them go ahead of him into the kitchen. Judith tipped back her head and smiled up at him provocatively. Rachel put aside her work, and even Matthew came to the door to see the young folks off. "I'm so glad you've come," Judith dimpled. "Now we can all walk together." "I'm not going to the husking," John told her, smiling. "I think I shall stay here and visit with Mercy instead." "But they're all expecting you. Mercy doesn't mind. Do you, Mercy?" John shook his head, still smiling. There was a reflection of Judith's excitement in his own pale face. "I think I shall stay here," he insisted. "There is something I want to speak to your father about." His words had a breathtaking effect. Judith took a step backward, one hand at her throat, and a wave of scarlet spread from the white collar to her black curls. "Tonight?" she whispered in unbelief. Then suddenly joy came flooding past every doubt and restraint. "Oh, Father," she cried impetuously, "he doesn't need to miss the husking, does he? You know what he wants to ask. Say yes now so we can go to the party together." Matthew Wood was bewildered. "Why, daughter," he rebuked her, "what sort of talk is this?" "Shameless talk, and I don't care," laughed Judith, tossing her black curls. "Oh, Father, you must have guessed. John doesn't need to tell you." Such radiance was irresistible. Matthew Wood's stern features softened, and when he turned to John, he was actually smiling. "If you will come courting such a headstrong, brazen girl," he said indulgently, "then I can only give you both my blessing. Perhaps you can teach her some meekness." John stood dumbfounded, his pale face shocked, completely colorless. He seemed totally unable to collect his wits. "Tell them," urged Kit silently and desperately. "You've got to say something, John, right away." As if he had heard her, John opened his white lips and made a hoarse sound. "Sir, he attempted. Then, still incredulous, he looked back at Judith. Every trace of pride and haughtiness was wiped from her face. Such utter happiness and trust shone from those blue eyes that John faltered, and in that moment of hesitation he was lost. William's heavy hand descended on his shoulder. Aunt Rachel held out both hands to him with tears in her eyes. Then Mercy came slowly from the hearth, her head up, her great eyes clear and lustrous. "I'm so happy for you both," she said warmly. Only Kit could say nothing. Perhaps I dreamed it, she thought, watching Mercy, but she knew she had not dreamed the love in Mercy's eyes that summer evening. Now no one but herself would ever know. She had counted on Judith's pride, but Mercy did not have Judith's pride. It was something much stronger than pride that upheld her. Presently I'm going to stop there because we're at our 20 minutes, and that is a good stopping point. But oh my gosh, I hate this part of the story. John Holbrook is not supposed to be with Judith. He's supposed to be with Mercy because that's who he loves. So we have this many more pages to find out if that wrong gets righted. So I will see all of you on Sunday when we read. I can't talk today. I don't know what's wrong with me. Actually, I will see you tomorrow when we do picture books, and then Sunday we will come back to The Witch of Blackbird Pond. I will see you all then. Have a good day. Bye.